And people would start to make fun of me, like, oh, he sounds so proper. So I started to say, wegen dem Hund, wegen dem Wetter.
Yeah.
And then someone corrected me.
I know.
And it was the most frustrating experience. I'm like, I know
this
it's
on
right.
purpose.
I did this on purpose so you guys wouldn't make fun of me. And now I'm getting corrected.
Hello, servus, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Felicia. I'm from Munich, Germany, but I currently live in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'm with my friend Josh again.
Hey guys.
If you've watched our last video about our bilingual friendship, then you already know him. If you haven't watched that, you should definitely do that now. Pause this video, watch the other one, and then come back to this video. Unfortunately, last time we didn't get to answer all of your questions, and actually there have been follow-up questions since then too. So that's why we're here again, and we're gonna talk about our bilingual friendship again, and this is the part 2 to the last video. Before we start, we wanted to say thank you to all of you guys for all of your positive feedback, especially regarding Josh's German skills, of course.
Well, there was lots of feedback about your English too, but just wanted to say thank you guys. The comments were amazing and really encouraging. You guys even gave me some tips on things that I can work with my pronunciation as well. So keep those comments coming.
Yeah, and they're super interesting for us to read always anyways. And I even felt like I should probably sit down more and practice my English pronunciation because I know it's not perfect at all. And I hardly ever, I don't even think I've ever done that I sat down and practiced my pronunciation. So I probably should.
I definitely have. I can specifically remember once while I was in high school and the German word for teacher is Lehrer. And most Americans would pronounce it as Lehrer.
Yeah,
and
I wouldn't even be able to do that, Lehrer.
So I laid in bed and I would lay there and go, Lehrer, 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 and try not to pronounce the R.
And that's really impressive, actually, that you did that. And it paid off. Okay, so the question that was definitely asked the most after the last video was regarding Josh's German skills. So how did you learn German so well? What were your resources? How hard was it for you? How did you lose your accent? What's your story?
So I'd like to correct something from the last video. I started learning German in the 10th grade, but I was not 13. I must have been closer to 15. I don't think I had my driver's license yet, but I was in the 10th grade. I was really lucky in high school to have a native German speaker as my German teacher. She was from Thüringen. So having that influence from the beginning and hearing a proper accent, albeit somewhat accented from that region, was definitely a huge influence and helped me be motivated to lose my accent. I had 3 years of German in high school, and that came relatively easy to me. I really enjoyed it, so that also helped. And then I decided to continue it at college as well. So one of my majors was German studies. So I studied the German language for a year and a half at university, and then literature following that. So
how many years is that in total?
Altogether, it would have been 3 in high school and then 3 in college because I finished a little early. As far as outside of classroom learning, from meeting Germans, that definitely was a huge advantage for me as far as learning pronunciation and kind of the everyday language of the colloquialisms, learning what endings to drop and what English words I was allowed to use in German and which ones not. But outside of that, or just besides that, I watched a lot of German television. ZDF Mediathek was one of my biggest resources.
Yeah, that's also what I tell people, how to learn a second language in general. Just watch a bunch of TV shows, Netflix, whatever.
Yep. Finding specific series that you can really get into is fun too. I know there was one that helped me get good at understanding Bavarian, Rosenheim-Kops. And that was a huge, it was a fun thing for me to watch.
Yeah, I've actually never watched that show, but it's entirely in Bavarian dialect,
no,
right?
There are characters who speak Bavarian and characters that speak standard German as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so besides that, what were your resources?
Yeah, I watched a lot of YouTube videos. As far as the pronunciation of the German R, there's a YouTube channel called Easy German. And at the beginning, way back in their career of making these videos, they had pronunciation videos of specific consonants in German. So I used that. Yeah. And then they go on the streets and talk to everyday people too. And it's all subtitled in German and English. So that was a huge resource.
And besides that, you just had your school materials, right?
Yeah, for a bit I put my phone in German and those type of little things.
Yeah.
Eventually I realized it's not really helping me learn that much besides the word maybe Einstellungen.
Yeah.
But other than that, no.
There was another question asking whether you had an accent in the beginning, like an American accent, or whether you always try to pronounce the words as German as possible from the beginning.
I definitely had a more American accent at the beginning. I think I was
natural,
always,
right?
yeah, I think I was always interested in losing my accent. It was interesting. Someone wrote in the comments that it's almost like he had heard German while he was in his mother's womb.
Really?
But for me, one of my thought processes was, I know I can do it. So I'm going to work really hard.
So you're just very ambitious.
So I said, I have German heritage. My ancestors were able to speak German, so I can too. And that was definitely a huge motivating factor and something that kept me working at it. When I started, I didn't say ich, I would say ish.
Yeah.
But
you didn't say ich?
I didn't say ich,
Okay.
because my teacher couldn't stand hearing ich. So it was always ish.
Because
Ich
ich
weiß
to German
nicht.
native sounds like Berlin dialect.
Yeah. And I don't know if maybe it has something to do with where she's from, that she's more comfortable hearing
Where
the
is
ish.
she from?
She's from Erfurt, so more east. She speaks Thuringian, but
A little Sächsisch, right? Or no?
so the people from Thüringen will tell you it sounds nothing like Sächsisch,
Okay.
but to those who aren't from that region, they sound the same.
It's like a little Sächsisch accent more than the dialect, right?
Mhm. Yeah, she didn't really speak dialect, but her standard German was accented somewhat with that dialect.
Another follow-up question on that same topic was how you managed to, first of all, learn German and then also become fluent and also stay fluent while you were in the US the whole time. And German isn't really spoken a lot in the US. How did you do that?
Ja, das ist eine gute Frage. Also erstmal, wie gesagt, ich habe immer von Muttersprachlern gelernt und das hat auf jeden Fall was dazu beigetragen.
Ja.
Aber zusätzlich dazu, ich habe mir immer die Deutschen ausgesucht. Also Cincinnati, wie du gesagt hast, also es hört sich ein bisschen komisch an, aber das stimmt schon. Also da muss man so absichtlich die Deutschen aussuchen, damit man üben kann.
Aber wie meinst du das? Also du hast dir deutsche Freunde absichtlich gesucht?
Ja, das ist, was ich meine.
Okay.
Ich habe auch immer bei deutschen Firmen gearbeitet, also Praktika gemacht und dadurch habe ich auch viel Kontakt mit Deutschland gehabt oder halt mit Deutschen. Und dadurch habe ich also jede Menge, wie sagt man denn, Opportunities to practice.
Möglichkeiten.
Ja, Möglichkeiten, mein Deutsch zu üben. Aber nee, also der Abstand, also halt, dass ich hier in den USA bin und hier gibt es keine Deutschen, das stimmt einfach nicht.
Ja, vor allem Cincinnati, hier gibt es wirklich wahnsinnig viele deutsche Organisationen, Clubs, Stammtische, dann hast du ja in der Uni Deutsch studiert, da gibt es ja dann auch Deutsch-Muttersprachler.
Vizepräsident vom Deutschclub, also vom
German
Deutschverein
Club,
da an der Uni. Also wenn man wirklich Interesse hat, dann findet man immer Mittel und Wege, die Sprache zu üben.
Ja, und da gab es auch eine Frage, wie wir uns getroffen haben. Also so haben wir uns auch getroffen.
Ja, genau, bei einem Stammtisch.
Genau, also hier gibt es einen wöchentlichen Stammtisch in einem so einem deutschen Restaurant, das halt German Heritage hat. Aktuell natürlich gibt es den nicht, den Stammtisch wegen Corona, aber den gibt es normalerweise einmal die Woche und da haben wir uns das erste Mal getroffen und dann eben auch über die ganzen anderen Freunde, die auch zweisprachig waren.
Ja, genau.
Okay, es gab noch eine Frage dazu, in welcher Sprache wir fluchen und jemand anders hat gefragt, when you get angry, mad or frustrated, do you start talking in German? I'm assuming that was directed to you.
Probably.
Ja, in welcher Sprache fluchen wir? Also ich fluche mehr auf Englisch, würde ich sagen.
Und ich mehr auf Deutsch.
Ich fluche eigentlich in beiden Sprachen, aber ich würde sagen mehr auf Englisch, weil es dann nicht so schlimm klingt.
Genau, wollte ich gerade sagen. Also vor allem, wenn ich da mit Menschen unterwegs bin, die kein Deutsch sprechen und ich wirklich,
dann sowieso.
wirklich raushauen will, dass jemand ein Volldepp ist, dann lieber Deutsch.
Du machst das vor allem beim Autofahren.
Ja, das stimmt.
Also selbst wenn ich mit dir im Auto bin und wir reden auf Englisch, dann irgendwer bremst blöd oder so, dann fängst du plötzlich an auf Deutsch zu fluchen.
Aber ich bin ganz ehrlich gesagt ein bisschen aggressiv, wenn ich da fahre. Ich fahre eher nach deutscher Art.
Ja, gibt es eigentlich einen deutschen Begriff für Road Rage?
Keine Ahnung.
Ich glaube nicht. Ja, und bei mir, gut, auf Englisch ist es halt nicht so einfach, gell, weil jeder versteht Englisch, also zumindest alle Deutschen, wenn du halt fuck sagst, das muss ich jetzt wahrscheinlich zensieren.
Ja. Aber das sagen die Deutschen sehr oft.
Ja, sagen wir ständig. Wir sagen auch ständig fucking und shit und was sagen wir noch? Also wir haben viele englische Schimpfwörter, die wir benutzen.
Es hat nicht unbedingt was mit der Frage zu tun, aber etwas, was für mich sehr lustig war, das erste Mal, als ich in Deutschland war und Radio gehört habe, dass sie das nicht zensieren. Zensieren. They don't censor it.
Ja.
Und halt da hört man dann ständig da...
Also in den Liedern meinst du?
In den Liedern,
Beispiel,
ja genau, das meine ich. Also nicht in irgendeiner Reportage oder halt...
Also dass die Schimpfwörter nicht zensiert werden, wie oft in Amerika.
Ja.
Also wenn irgendein Rap-Lied ist oder auch einfach Popsong, wo halt fuck oder
da gibt es dann
sowas.
eine Clean Version.
Ja.
Und in
Kennen wir auch alle. Es gibt ja so ein Beispiel, I Wanna Love You.
Ja, genau.
Zum Beispiel, das ist dann die Clean Version von
Genau.
dem Lied. Ja, in Deutschland wird das einfach gespielt, was aber bestimmt auch damit zu tun hat, dass das eben nicht unsere Muttersprache ist. Und tatsächlich so ganz übler Gangster-Rap auf Deutsch wird kaum im Radio gespielt, deswegen weiß ich gar nicht, wie das da gehandelt wird.
Ja. Ich weiß aber, ich saß mal da in einem Auto mit einer amerikanischen Familie, als ein Lied gespielt wurde.
Also in Deutschland?
Ja, in Deutschland, wo wirklich viele Schimpfworte drin waren. Und da mussten wir dann sofort wechseln, da die Kinder da saßen und die Eltern sind komplett so, das wussten wir nicht, dass das hier gespielt wird.
Es ist auch tatsächlich ein bisschen ein Kulturunterschied. Ja. Also in Deutschland ist Fluchen jetzt nicht die feine Art natürlich, aber es ist wirklich auch auf Deutsch viel normaler als hier. Und ich habe jetzt im letzten Jahr unter anderem kleine Kinder unterrichtet hier in Cincinnati und ich habe einmal vor denen geflucht aus Versehen, weil ich das einfach
gar nicht... Auf Englisch oder Deutsch?
Auf Englisch. Weil ich das einfach gar nicht gewohnt bin, dass das so schlimm ist. Also ganz ehrlich, meine Eltern haben ganz normal geflucht. Es machen jetzt nicht alle Familien gleich natürlich, aber es ist nicht so ein Tabu wie hier. Ja,
meiner Familie, also Kind durfte ich nicht mal sagen, da musste ich Bottom sagen. Ja.
Was? Aber das ist doch ein ganz normales Wort.
Ja, also für meine Eltern waren es damals ein Schritt zu weit.
Krass.
Ja.
Nee, also ich glaube, meine Familie war da auch sehr liberal, aber auch in der Schule, also ich kann mich nicht erinnern, dass das irgendwann mal ein Thema war. Klar, gute Lehrer fluchen einfach generell nicht, aber es gab jetzt nie eine Situation, wo ich mich daran erinnern kann, dass es so eine Art Fluchkasse oder sowas gab.
Ja, bei uns auch nicht.
Okay.
Also vielleicht mal, ist mir nie passiert, aber ich habe schon mal gehört, dass wenn man als kleines Kind ein Schimpfwort sagt, dann kriegt man manchmal Seife auf der Zunge.
Ernsthaft?
Ja.
Ew, das sollte verboten sein, oder?
Kommt drauf an, was für eine Einstellung da war.
Also der Mund wird quasi wortwörtlich gewaschen.
You have a dirty mouth, so I'm gonna come over here because I'm gonna wash out that dirty mouth.
Krass.
Ja.
Ansonsten nochmal zu der Frage, weil das hast du das letzte Mal zu mir gesagt, dass wenn ich wütend oder frustriert bin oder sowas, dass ich nicht automatisch nämlich auf Deutsch wechsle. Also teilweise ist es für mich dann sogar einfacher, auf Englisch sauer zu sein. Also ich bin jetzt nicht oft sauer, aber wenn das mal passiert, dann rede ich tatsächlich oft auf Englisch.
Ich glaube, da fühlt man zumindest so eine bestimmte Freiheit.
Und man fühlt es vielleicht nicht so intensiv,
genau,
man hat so einen Abstand zu der Situation vielleicht, Ja, und außerdem, sobald man irgendwie wütend ist, muss man auch nicht mehr die Sprache wechseln, weil wenn man irgendwie bestimmte Emotionen in der Sprache gerade hat, dann denkt man eh nicht mehr über die Worte nach, dann fließt es einfach. Das ist so wie, wenn man 2 Bier getrunken hat.
Ja, genau.
Dann ist
entweder
besser.
Bier trinken oder wütend werden.
Okay, next question is, what is a funny word that you two always laugh about in translation?
Ich habe neulich eine Mail von meinem Chef bekommen, der ist Deutsche, und in der Mail stand, ich freue mich wie ein Schnitzel. Ist das ein Sprichwort im Deutschen? Da habe ich mich kaputt gelacht, ey. Ich freue mich wie ein Schnitzel. I'm so happy like a Schnitzel.
Okay, das ist sowieso ein Thema, was ich ganz gerne als eigenes Video machen würde. Sagt mal, ob ihr das cool fändet, dass wir uns mal hinsetzen und einfach über so Sprichworte oder Worte reden, die man vielleicht nicht in die andere Sprache übersetzen kann oder wie man sie in die andere Sprache übersetzen würde. Weil da würde ich jetzt zum Beispiel sagen, das würde ich mit Happy Camper. Also ich freue mich wie ein Schnitzel, I'm a happy camper.
Okay,
also warum auch immer würde ich jetzt als zweisprachiger Mensch behaupten, das ist so ungefähr die gleiche Tonalität.
Ja, schon. So also das mit Happy Camper ist mir nie aufgefallen.
Also es ist ja überhaupt nicht der gleiche Wortlaut oder so, aber
die gleiche Bedeutung.
Ja.
Lustiges Wort, Stachelschwein.
Ja. Stachelschwein. Ja, okay, du findest über die ganzen Tiere
oder
witzig.
Faultier. Ich meine, das ist mein Lieblingswort im Deutschen.
Lazy
Faultier.
animal.
To the American viewers or English-speaking viewers, what do you think a lazy animal would be? That's the direct translation for Faultier.
Dum, dum, dum.
Literally.
You got your guess? Here's the solution.
A sloth. It's just prächtig.
Prächtig. Ja, or Stinktier.
Yeah, what do you think a stink animal would be? A skunk. But Stachelschwein, a prickly pig, a porcupine.
You should have your own genre, your own little
series.
I'll
start my own series.
Do your own channel and your own series and just do like, what do you think a lazy animal is? You got your answer? There's a lot of funny animal words that we actually end up talking about a lot. We've talked about these so many times.
One of my favorite topics to talk about.
Yeah, lazy animal. Okay, another question was, I would love to hear a discussion about accents in English and German. And so, I mean, there's a lot of accents in both languages.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Especially in German, I would say.
But yeah, German definitely. In the US, we have a couple regional accents for English. In the UK, I think that there's more variation in accent than we have here in the US. But from my experience as an American, I definitely see that there's a huge difference in accents in Germany. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and you're able to understand a lot of them. And
a lot of them.
Speak some of them.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to say I can speak them, but I can imitate them somewhat.
Imitate them, yeah.
So Bavarian I have had a lot of contact with, which is spoken in southern Germany in the state of Bavaria. One accent that can be difficult for me to understand is the Schwabian, Schwäbisch. If they really, if they really are speaking heavy dialect, then I struggle sometimes. More mid-Germany, there really isn't too much that's too difficult.
I mean, there's like Cologne one.
Yeah, Kölsch I don't think I would understand. I haven't had much I haven't had much contact with Köln.
It always depends
Köln or Cologne.
Köln. It always depends on how heavy someone speaks that accent.
Well, and depending on the region in Germany too, there are different words that you'll use.
Yeah.
So if you don't know that word and you only know the standard word, then you're gonna struggle.
Yeah, like one of the typical words is the German word for bread roll. So in southern Germany and Austria we call it Semmel, or Semi in Bavarian dialect. And then in standard German you usually say Brötchen, and then there's also Weckle or Weck. In Baden-Württemberg. Okay, das klingt jetzt irgendwie voll komisch, das die ganze Zeit auf Englisch und dann die deutschen Worte zu sagen. Ein anderes Beispiel, das habe ich auch schon mal in meinem Karnevalsvideo erwähnt, ist zum Beispiel Krapfen und Berliner und Pfannkuchen. Also da gibt es auch 1000 verschiedene Begriffe dafür. Generell für alles, was irgendwie mit Karneval und auch viele Sachen, was mit Weihnachten und so weiter zu tun hat, da gibt es oft ganz viele verschiedene Begriffe.
Und was ich auch wirklich interessant finde, ist, dass man manchmal wirklich reines Hochdeutsch sprechen könnte, aber nur von der Wortwahl her kann man raushören, woher man kommt.
Ja, das stimmt. Und sowas gibt es natürlich auch in Amerika. Also das krieg sogar ich mit, obwohl ich bisher nur in Ohio gewohnt habe. Also ich meine, ich bin schon viel rumgereist in Amerika, aber gelebt habe ich wirklich nur in Cincinnati bisher. Aber es gibt zum Beispiel diesen typischen Unterschied zwischen Gym-Shoes und
Ja, aber ich glaube, Gym-Shoes ist schon ein Cincinnati-spezifisch Ding.
Ja?
Ja, ich glaube nur in Cincinnati oder vielleicht auch in Chicago wird Gym-Shoe gesagt.
Und im
Tennisschuh sagt man normalerweise.
Und
oder
Sneaker?
Ich glaube, Sneaker ist eher an der Ostküste. Auch ein anderes Wort, was ein gutes Beispiel ist Shopping Cart. Also hier im Norden sagt man Shopping Cart, aber im Süden sagt man manchmal Buggy.
Stimmt,
zum Beispiel,
das hast du mir letztens gesagt. Das wusste ich zum Beispiel gar nicht. Oder Pop and Soda. Wo sagt man Pop?
Pop ist eher ein Midwest-Ding.
Okay.
Und Soda, glaube ich, ist so der Überbegriff.
Standard.
Also das ist Standard, sage ich.
Also ich sag wenn dann Soda.
Aber was lustig ist, ich weiß, in Großbritannien sagt man dann zum Beispiel nicht Soda, da sagt man Fizzy Drink.
Really?
Ja, it's weird.
Echt?
Ja.
Das wusste ich auch gar nicht. I'm honestly not familiar with too many English dialects that you'll hear in the US. I know like the Midwestern accent
the one
that
you hear around here often.
Yeah, that I hear a lot, that I apparently also speak. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's the Southern accent, obviously, that can be really tricky for me to understand, actually, because I've...
One thing that's interesting... sorry, I interrupted you.
No worries. I was just going to say, because I haven't really been in touch with it too much, so sometimes...
One thing that's interesting between... as far as the accent of this like north-south difference is oftentimes you'll get a difference between metropolitan and country. So people who are from cities tend to speak more like me, but people who are from a little more country or further out from the cities, they have a little bit more of a southern twang, even though they may not be in the south.
That's true. Yeah, so you'll even find that here in Ohio when you drive out to the country.
Question for you though, can you differentiate between like a Boston accent and a New York accent?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I haven't really tried, so I'm not sure. I would have to sit down with two people from the two places and try, but I don't think so. I know that there's a Cleveland accent, so I mean, since we're here in Ohio, obviously there's a lot of people who are from other places in Ohio, and I used to live with, I think, 2 or 3 people who were originally from Cleveland. Yeah. And apparently in the beginning, I kind of adapted their Cleveland A, or what was it? Yeah, A.
Yeah, the A.
Yeah, like accent.
Yeah.
And I didn't even notice that. So I know about that accent. I'm not sure if I would be able to identify it or whether it would just sound normal to me.
I think that's also just an even further north thing. I mean, for us in Ohio, it's very Cleveland specific, but I know people from Michigan or Wisconsin tend to speak that way too. It's more flat.
accent.
Yeah. I had a friend in high school who moved to Cincinnati from Wisconsin, and she used to say that we all sounded Southern.
Really?
Which for me, I don't think I sound Southern at all.
I mean, so for those of you who don't know, most of you probably do know, Cincinnati is right at the border to Kentucky. So we're like 10 minutes away. Like in Cincinnati downtown, you're 10 to 5 minutes away from Kentucky, which is technically considered the South already.
Yeah, a lot of Kentuckians would say that Northern Kentucky is part of the North.
It's not the South, but yeah. To Kentucky in general, when you hear that, you usually associate it with the South.
It's like how people say Augsburg isn't really a part of Bayern.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to discuss here.
Yeah.
But that's just an interesting thing to know. So like, we're pretty South.
Yeah. We're right on the border between North and South.
Yeah. There is another accent that is tricky for me to understand sometimes, like the African American accent / dialect. But that really depends on how heavy someone speaks it to. That's always the case. If someone just like speaks it a little bit, I'll be able to understand it.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's really hard for me, and it makes me feel like, with all of those accents, Southern accent too, it makes me feel really embarrassed because I basically have to ask after every sentence what that person said.
Yeah,
even though I technically speak the language, but it's just hard for me to understand which words they even said.
Yeah, well, the grammar's somewhat different as well. But yeah, that would make sense that may be a little difficult for someone who isn't a native English speaker to understand.
But I'm practicing. And one thing that's actually interesting is that there's a parallel between the Southern accent, I think, from as far as I know, and Bavarian dialect regarding the double negation. Is that how you say it?
Yeah,
double negation.
Double negation.
Yeah.
Or I think that's what we would say.
Yeah.
A double negative. So saying like, I ain't got no, for example.
Yeah, I ain't got no money. And then in Bavarian dialect, and I'm not a native Bavarian dialect speaker, so don't judge me, please, all Bavarians out there or all Germans out there, but you could say something like, I hab kein Geld nieder, or something like that, which also has the double negative. Okay, next question I have on my list is, does your native language sound different after learning a second language fluently? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think a lot of it has to do with geography as well, where you are. So when I'm in Germany and I hear Americans speaking, it sounds the hard R is very present to me. And I'm like, oh, do we really pronounce it that?
You call it the hard R?
Like the American R, the
Yeah.
And I hear a lot of when I hear Americans speaking. So that stands out to me as definitely I'm more conscious of that while I'm abroad. But when I'm here in the US, it's the way that I grew up speaking, and it's just what I'm familiar with. So I wouldn't say that necessarily changes my perception, but it is interesting. I think also in England, I didn't realize when I was visiting England how hard we pronounce our R's.
Did you use different vocab when you were in England?
I didn't. I tried to stay pretty American, but I do sometimes, depending on who I'm talking with. I have a couple British coworkers, and I don't know, I watch a lot of British television too, so you get used to hearing certain words when certain people have certain accents that you would want to use then. Yeah. It's the same thing in German though. When I'm in the South, I tend to say more Semmel than I say Brötchen.
Right. Yeah, for me, I think it also depends on the context. When I'm in Germany with all of my German friends, I don't think German sounds different to me. But when I'm here, sometimes I do kind of have this outside look on my native language, which is kind of weird. I know a lot of Americans who are more or less fluent in German, but who aren't as fluent as you.
Yeah.
And then I tend to do dumb things that I think some Germans do sometimes, and I tend to like speak dumber German. Like I tend to speak very simple German and use very simple words, and I don't really think that's a good thing. I don't like when I catch myself do that.
I know one thing that's interesting though, and you've mentioned this in the past, that from speaking with me relatively often, sometimes you make mistakes that I make in German.
I know.
My bad German is rubbing off on you.
Yeah, but that's the same thing with me, though. I'm not sure. Does that happen to you? Because that happens to...
Yeah, no, certainly.
I know that I do that to other friends that I hang out with who aren't even bilingual, just like American friends. Yeah. When they hang out a lot with me, they will make the same mistakes as me.
I use the present progressive sometimes in places that we wouldn't
really?
as native speakers. So,
give an example.
A native English speaker would say, I run all the time. And oftentimes a mistake that Germans make, because they don't have that tense, is I'm running all the time, which we wouldn't say as native English speakers in the context of speaking about something that we do habitually.
And so that now that you hang out with a lot of German native speakers, you
Yeah.
sometimes say it wrong
Yeah,
yourself.
sometimes the mistake has rubbed off on me.
Yeah. Okay, another question that goes back to the whole question about accents is an American accent in German annoying to listen to? And that
Gefällt
really
es dir
depends. It really depends on how heavy it is.
Yeah.
So the one that you just did, that's okay. I feel like the accent isn't even the main problem. If someone just doesn't know the sentence structure properly, it can be just really exhausting to listen to that person. And you have to figure out what the person is trying to say. If it's really just the accent and the person otherwise knows the words and the grammar, then I don't think it's a big deal for me.
No, I think for me, it doesn't necessarily rub me the wrong way. I mean, it's something that I put a lot of time into trying to reduce my American accent, but it's something that not everyone is able to do, and people don't have the time or the desire to do it. But I think it goes back more toward to if the grammar is correct or not. I think that's something that can be more irritating. Because you hear just the same mistake over and over again. If it's just a pronunciation thing, that's different.
Yeah, and also I want to say to all of you Americans or non-native German speakers who are learning German as a second language, you don't have to have a perfect accent to speak German to us native speakers, because we're going to be really impressed with you just for trying and just for like knowing some German, because German is a really difficult language to learn.
You might switch to English though.
It's possible, yeah. Like Germans do that a lot. I actually do that a lot. But even Germans whose English isn't as good as mine tend to do that because we tend to feel bad for the poor American trying to speak our difficult language. And we're like, it may be easier for us to just switch to English. When we talk about it the other way around, German accents in English, I would say honestly that annoys me a little bit more personally.
Okay, interesting.
But like if it's a really heavy German accent, obviously I still have a German accent, but if it's a really, really heavy German accent, like I don't know what to do, this is really annoying.
It's the really, this is really hard.
And the TH. If
this is really hard.
This is really hard. Then I don't think that sounds nice at all.
To me, it doesn't really rub me the wrong way. Here in the US, we're so used to hearing accented English that I think we're just mostly happy that people are learning the language.
That's very true.
It sounds funny sometimes, and people might die kichern vielleicht da, aber in general, it doesn't rub me the wrong way or annoy me.
Yeah, people also, by the way, asked. They wanted for me to do a more German accent. So you just got it. That was my way of doing a more German accent. But just in general, I personally don't think that the German accent is as pretty and as nice sounding as, for example, a French accent or a Spanish accent.
Okay, I'll give you that. I'll give you that.
Does the dynamic change when you switch languages? For that one, I feel like, what do you guys think? What was it like in the last video? Because we actually switched quite a lot in the last video. I think if I had to guess that I would say I speak a little louder in English.
That would make sense.
Yeah, but besides that, I feel like our dynamic does not really change.
Well, yeah, I would agree that it doesn't change too much because we can just switch to the other language if we aren't feeling like we're expressing ourselves properly.
Yeah, it's not like speaking German is more serious and speaking English is more fun or anything.
No, I wouldn't think so.
Okay, another question that I actually already announced in the last video that we'll talk about. What is the longest German word that you know? Oder wir machen es mal lieber auf Deutsch. Was ist das längste deutsche Wort, was du kennst?
Ich kenne es nicht hundertprozentig auswendig, aber Donaudampfschifffahrtsgesellschaftskapitän, glaube ich.
Das ist so das typische Wort. Ich kenne das auch, also wenn du es jetzt, ich hätte es sonst auch nicht gewusst. Irgendwas mit Donaudampfschifffahrtsgesellschaft.
What's the longest English word you know?
They're all so short. They're all two different words. There's always spaces in between.
Have you heard the one example, though, of anti-disestablishmentarianism?
No.
That's like the typical one that people go to.
I guess the Mary Poppins one would be the longest one, even though...
Isn't it different in German?
Slightly different, but honestly, right now, without looking it up one time, I don't think I can say it in either language.
I know it in English.
Yeah, well, in German, supercalifragilisticexpialigetisch. And in English, it's expialidocious.
Yeah, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
Yeah, but I definitely screwed this up a little bit, so please don't blame me. I haven't seen Mary Poppins in a long time. Okay, the last question for today was, did it come naturally to us to make native speaker mistakes? So kind of like
Yeah.
not say the endings properly and stuff like that.
I specifically remember the Germans don't like to use the genitive case, which is a grammatical case in German. And when you learn German, you learn it. So
Yeah, because it's technically correct.
yeah, when you write an official paper or something, you would use the genitive case.
Or you should at least.
You should. So I would always say wegen des Hundes or wegen des Wetters. And people would start to make fun of me, like, oh, he sounds so proper. So I started to say wegen dem Hund, wegen dem Wetter.
Yeah.
And then someone corrected me.
I know.
And it was the most frustrating experience. I'm like, I know
this
it's
on
right. I did
purpose.
this on purpose so you guys wouldn't make fun of me, and now I'm getting corrected.
I know. So did it come naturally to you to do those things wrong, or did you actually sit down and be like, okay, I need to do this differently to sound native?
I think at the beginning it didn't come naturally because I was relatively new in Germany at the time. But the more you hear the mistake over and over and over again, it starts to become integrated into your speech. So I would start to, it became very natural for me to say wegen dem Auto.
Yeah.
There's another thing though another mistake I would make in German, and it has to do with als or wie. And that's specifically a Southern German thing. And because I was around Bavarian speakers, I started to make that mistake. And that's one that I don't like making.
Yeah, I don't like making that.
So
either.
saying, ich bin größer wie du, for example. I'm as tall as you.
No,
Or no, I'm
taller.
taller than you.
Yeah.
I don't like making that mistake. It should be, ich bin größer als du.
Yeah. Yeah, well, for me, actually, I feel like that's a different story. I think I picked up those colloquial mistakes naturally without being aware of it, just by watching American shows and just by being in this country. And I started making these mistakes without even noticing. And sometimes right now I don't really write papers anymore, but back in grad school, when I had to write papers in English, I sometimes wasn't aware and I wasn't sure, is this proper English? Is this colloquial English? Should I look this up? And so
Von dem her.
yeah, well,
That was the perfect example of what I would do. I didn't know that wasn't
did you
standard.
put that in a paper before?
I'm sure I have.
Yeah, von dem her is something he said last time. I think he said it a few times.
Yeah,
Probably.
oh, yeah, probably.
And people
I say
pointed
it all
it
the
out in the
time.
comments. And yes, it's colloquial, but it's really not that bad.
No.
And you use it all the time. But yes, I would not use that in a paper. And for me, I wasn't aware, and I'm still not fully aware of all the colloquial mistakes that I make in English.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was quite a long conversation again. Thank you guys so much for watching it until here. We will definitely make videos together in the future, so please let us know which topics you would like for us to talk about. Give us your ideas in the comments below. I think it would be cool to talk about that one topic about words and idioms that you can't properly translate. But I'm sure you have other ideas too, so let us know. Subscribe to my channel if you're not a subscriber yet, and if you like what I do on here or what we do on here right now. Follow me on Instagram, and if you want to support me even more, check out my new Patreon page, and you can become a patron to this channel if you want to. I hope you're all being safe and healthy, and I'll see you next time. Tschüss!
Servus!